End of day.
This is a bit like watching a play written by a dog.
How does it feel to be at the head of a family where most people have got ASBOs?
Not more. It's annoying.
Here's one we made earlier.
If all else fails and you've still got airtime to fill, you can go out and make up your own news. Just put a reporter there and get him to do anything. It'll do.
Who needs to ask questions if you can read people's minds?
Yeah, but who needs to read people's minds if you can ask them questions?
Here, in one of the most mental news reports ever created, Sky News took a cross-section of Brits, popped sensors on their heads and made them watch clips of contemporary Britain to see what their minds did.
Using sensors attached to their heads which pick up electrical impulses, we analysed how they responded to various images. The most negative response came from Christine, who considers herself an English patriot. Her graph revealed a strong dislike of various ethnic scenes.
You know, Various Ethnic Scenes was actually the working title for Slumdog Millionaire.
Look at the contrasting brain maps. On the left is when Christine was looking at Muslim women wearing veils. On the right was when she saw a Union Jack.
Just as well they didn't show her Anjem Chowdhury. The sensor might have exploded.
It's nice to have diversity, but people should try and get along and mix in more.
Well, you're certainly doing your best to mix in with your mad hat.
As you can see, TV news journalists aren't just journalists, but little filmmakers, and the tools of their artistic trade have grown more powerful as time has gone by. Early news reports were painstakingly constructed using cumbersome equipment, which meant the resulting films themselves were often quotidian, murky, shoddily framed snooze fests about brown rivers and closing factories, although on the plus side the reporters were bloody sexy.
To make matters worse, the manager of the local employment office says that in the jobs for which the people here are trained, that's weaving and winding, the prospects of finding similar work in Skilmersdale are non-existent.
As technology improved, news reports became snazzier, more mobile, more visually playful. Before long, a standard news report visual language established itself, one that's immediately recognisable to anyone. Me has this report. It starts here, with a lacklustre establishing shot of a significant location. Next, a walkie-talkie preamble from the auteur, pacing steadily towards the lens, punctuating every other sentence with a hand gesture and ignoring all the pricks milling around him like he's gliding through the fucking Matrix, before coming to a halt and posing a question. What comes next? Often something like this, a filler shot designed to give your eyes something to look at while my voice babbles on about facts. Sometimes it'll slow down to a halt, turn monochrome, and some of those facts will appear one by one on the screen. This is followed by the obligatory shots of overweight people with their faces subtly framed out, after which the report is padded out with a selection of lazy and pointless vox pops.
Usually get some inane chatter from people.
I think they do have too much. I think what we want to hear is actually what's happening and not what other people think of it.
I hate these sound bites. I don't want some punter's opinion usually. No.
Another bit of dull visual abstraction to plug another gap now before the report segues gracefully into a bit of human interest courtesy of some dowdy man opening letters in a kitchen and explaining how he's been affected by the issue.
When I'm watching the news, I don't really, there's a person talking to me, telling me what's going on, and I don't really listen to what they're saying. It's just news. It's just news.
He, unfortunately, was boring, so to wake you up, this is an animated chart, this is a silhouette representing the average family, and this is a lighthouse keeper being beheaded by a laser beam. As we near the end of the report, illustrative shots of pedestrians and signs and a pipe at a window. And then the final summary, ending on a whimsical shot of something nearby, accompanied by a wry sign-off. If you're lucky, a bit of wordplay fit for a king, or in other words, a regent's treat. Charlie Brooker, Newswipe, London. The style of such filler reports is so overfamiliar, your brain just filters them out, so it's hardly surprising the news sometimes tries to zhuzh things up a bit.
Recent years have seen a shift to more emotive, vaguely cinematic reports, pieces that try and convey an emotion, usually a bleak one.
Our worst nightmare's just come true. Someone's been up to no good at the nursery.
But reporters are reporters, not movie directors, which means the tricks they employ, the use of crappy emotive shots and evocative monochrome, sinister reconstructions and shitty moody lighting, is the stuff of terrible films.
the predator would strike at night. Only then would he launch his attack, shining his torch in the face of his elderly victims.
The end result is that visually emotive reports actually provoke the precise opposite reaction to the one I assume they're intending. Sit me in front of a report about abused children full of cliched shots of discarded teddies and haunting swings, and I don't think boo-hoo, I think what a cheesy B-movie.
A source said. There's a phrase you often hear or read in news reports, but what does it mean? Here's investigative journalist and freedom of information campaigner Heather Brooke with her view on anonymity.
When I came, I'd been a journalist in America, I came to Britain, the first thing I saw was that so much of the stories you read in a newspaper have no attribution at all. It'll be a spokesman for this government department, an official for the police, but nowhere would it have a name. Most people don't notice this at first, and they think, well, who cares? Who needs to know the names of these people? There's only really one reason why they would be anonymous, and that is to avoid accountability for what they say. If they were confident about what they're saying, they would put their name behind it. End of story. I was trained, as all American journalists are, that you always name your source. It's a really key point. Now in Britain, the way information disclosure has evolved is that it's a patronage system. It's who you know. And if you know the right people, they'll do you a favour, they'll give you a few little bits of info. If you do name them, there will be some bad feeling held. If you were a parliamentary lobby correspondent, for example, you'd quickly find that people would stop speaking to you. The danger is that because they know their name is not going to be linked with that statement, there's a temptation to bend the truth, to misrepresent the truth, sometimes to just outright lie. Probably the best known example is John Charles de Menezes, the Brazilian electrician who was shot to death in Stockwell Tube. The first thing that happened was some anonymous police spokesman realised it was a mistake. But what they did was they started to run a lot of erroneous information. They were sort of casting this aura of suspicion around him, saying that he was wearing this big puffy jacket, that he'd vaulted the barriers. They also said that the police had identified themselves and they told him to stop, and he'd ignored them and he'd run through and got on this tube carriage.
They followed him into the station, told him to stop, and when he ran inside a tube carriage, they opened fire.
When they finally had the public inquiry and all these statements were looked into, all those statements were totally false. They were, in fact, lies.
Today's report into whether the police lied about the shooting found that Scotland Yard did mislead the public.
Because we never knew by name who had issued these statements, there was nobody that we as the public could go back to and say, who do we call to account? Forest Gate, another example. Again, it was a botched operation that took up, an entire street with dozens of police officers. They arrested these two men. One of them got shot in the scuffle. Then the smearing started to come into the public domain. There was accusations about how they'd been involved in terrorist activity. One of the brothers of the suspects who'd been out at a protest pictured next to a man wearing a sort of mock suicide belt. And obviously the implication is these are the kind of people we're dealing with. Out of nowhere came this really bizarre accusation that one of the brothers had accessed child pornography.
A computer seized then was examined and allegedly contained photographs of child abuse downloaded from the internet.
Which he totally denied, and there was never any evidence to prove this, and that charge fell away. So then you have to wonder, why did all these charges build up? Anonymous sourcing allows that kind of smearing to happen. The line that they will put out is that we're providing public information, but they're not. That is a total crock. What they are providing is information control, which is completely the opposite of information sharing. As soon as these official spokespeople are named, they're individually accountable, and very often they have to resign. I mean, people think the British press are these, jackals, but the way they just roll over and accept it as if it's fact, as if it's like the word of God has come down and said, this is the way it is. But it isn't a fact, it's what somebody in authority has said. And that's what the public need to know. This is what somebody in authority, preferably named, has told us.
Well, something to think about there. Time for the Week in Bullshit.
So
Society, and as humanoid David Cameron highlights the value of parenting over the value of paupers having money, noted sociologists Dappy and Fazer from N-Dubs plant their buttocks on the This Week sofa to discuss their views on parenting with Andrew Neil, Abbott and Portillo in a thrilling studio debate.
Fraser and Dappy. You're Fraser, you're Dappy. Yeah. So we got it right. Parenting. Right. Almost right.
Fazer.
Oh, Fazer.